Hello and welcome back to Perspectives. And on today's show, news that Narendra Modi plans to repatriate 18,000 Indians living illegally in the US as Trump threatens tariffs. Meanwhile, Sikhs for Justice are in celebratory mood as Trump's inauguration fills the global media channels. But in other, more uncomfortable news for Narendra Modi, the Sikh Federation's international body reports that the UN has just issued a letter to the Indian Prime Minister detailing their analysis of India's numerous human rights violations, including, of course, the murder of Hardeep Singh Nijjar. And in Punjab, Sikhs plan a march to protest India Republic Day. Yes, that anniversary day the Constitution came into effect and India became a republic, a day marking the start of the modern era of persecution for the Sikh community. Well, joining me as always for Perspectives is our very own correspondent in Canada, James Cousineau. Good morning, James.
Good morning, Angus. There's excitement throughout the U.S. after an amazing inauguration event. And hey, we want to hear from you. Put it down in our comment section after the show what you think about the fact that the Sikh community was well represented. Let us know.
Indeed, please do that. And meanwhile, James and I together will be bringing you our perspectives on this daily news affecting the Sikh community across the world. And yes, we will indeed be taking a look at loads of your great comments which have been filling up below the video. So thank you as always for those. Right, James, let's get things started. What are you going to begin us with this morning?
Well, as I stated, Angus, it was exciting to see that Sikhs for Justice had a place at the table at the inauguration ball. And some would say that Modi was at home pouting because Trump didn't invite him to bring his entourage and try on the glass slipper at the ball. So let's take a look at some of the footage that we've been provided from Sikhs for Justice with regard to the inauguration and the ball, and then we'll have more discussion about it after we see this great video.
Khalistan Zindabad.
I said, all right, you wouldn't believe it. You look at her, she was so innocent. She's a killer. Always a killer. And we have a great vice president. So I want to tell you fantastic. That all people have right to self-determination. Today, as we stand at President Trump's Liberty Inauguration Ball, celebrating his leadership as a defender of liberty and freedom for all, Sikhs for Justice announced the opening of voter registration for Khalistan referendum. Sikhs from Kashmir to Kanyakumari, Sikhs for Justice announced the voter registration, and this is for the right to self-determination of the Sikh people who are currently being governed by India and occupied Punjab. This is a call for Sikhs to stand up and claim for freedom. The Khalistan movement is about justice, liberty, and the right to shape our destiny. Register now, SikhsForKhalistan.net. Stand with President Trump. Make America great again. Register for Sikh people's right to self-determination. SikhsForKhalistan.net. Kashmir to Kanyakumari. The Sikh people who are facing existential threat under Modi's regime. Register now.
Well, there you have it. I was really looking forward to seeing Gurpatwan doing the YMCA dance, but I didn't get to see it. I guess I've never seen him so quiet and subdued. It was just so unlike him, but I was just so happy for him to be there and the rest of Sikhs for Justice to be represented. The opportunity was just phenomenal, especially, as I said, with Modi sitting at home and Khalistan well represented at the president's inauguration. Now, this is something that is going to be not only shared, but I think it's going to be a big, big excitement for people around the world. And I'm not just talking about the Sikh community, I'm talking about all minorities and all people who look at the world as it is, and now they can see themselves attending such an amazing and such a prestigious event. That is something that definitely I think is going to really rattle some feathers, but I think that other people are really going to see it as an inspiration to what they can achieve if they just continue with their dreams and just make their voices count. And that is just so important. Now, also I found very interesting is that as the Modi manipulation media machine likes to point out that they have labeled Gurpatwan Singh Poonen basically a terrorist because he speaks out against the BJP and Modi and the RSS. But in fact, if he was such a threat, he definitely would not have been able to get the security clearance to be at the inauguration ball. Plain and simple. Obviously, they felt that the opinions of India are not legitimate, that they have no basis, and that it is just simply the Modi machine and the Hindutva media just playing a game on the world. So I think that that's very important to look at. I also found it very important or very interesting that a lot of the media was actually really going after the fact that there was not a visible a real heavy presence and visibility of minorities at the event. And therefore, I think that Gurpatwan Singh Poonen and the rest of the Sikhs for Justice were really there to represent all minorities, not just the Sikh community. And I think that's very important because it really takes into the whole custom, the whole belief, the whole part of Sikhi of everybody being equal, that everybody has the right to worship any god that they choose or any religion that they choose. And I think that that was really, for me, a takeaway from it is just them representing so many different minorities throughout the U.S. to be there in the presence of course, Donald J. Trump and his family, but also all of the others who were present for such a notable and historic event. Now, this is also important. If you noticed at the end, the announcement that Gurpatwan had made was about a new website, Sikhs, 4, Khalistan.net. Check it out. But it also, he announced that there is going to be referendum voting opportunities for people in India. I think that that's going to also upset Modi, and I think that Modi will make every step possible to try to shut that down. But it is important that we are seeing this historic event in Washington, but also the history and the making of a vote being held in India, and 2 locations, one in the north and one in the south. Amazing. Now, if you go to the Sikhs for Khalistan.net website, for anybody who is actually watching our show in India, there you have the registration forms available on the site for you to register to get your voice heard in the referendum for Khalistan. Very, very important. Now, I also think that it is important to point out, Angus, to people that may not know the history there, but the formation of Khalistan and recognition as an independent state as a homeland for Sikhs, it should not be confused with a nation of only Sikhs. It's going to be open to everyone. Prior to the annexation of the Sikh Empire by the British Empire in 1849, the empire was very successful at the open integration of many religions, faiths, and peoples of all backgrounds. And all of these groups had representation in the governing of the empire that were welcomed by the Sikh community. It'll truly be a nation of freedom, acceptance, and equality. It's an opportunity for Sikhs to show the world how true, harmonious living can be achieved. It'll be a nation of envy and respect by others, while demonstrating clear independence and international cooperation through respect and dignity for all. Very important. And I've also covered in this article that people are more than welcome to pause their frame on the TV or on the device they're watching this from to read the full article. But in terms of our time on the show, I don't want to spend it all on the one story, but I think that this is just an amazing day for the Khalistan referendum and as a bigger day for Sikhs all around the world, Angus.
Yes, actually, I think this is huge news. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, it might just sort of disappear into obscurity with obviously bigger stories in the mainstream media. But actually, for the Khalistan movement, this is deeply significant because the inauguration ball, or balls, I think there are a few in total, but certainly they are the golden ticket. Most of the population of America, no, most of the population of the Western world will have been trying to get a ticket to that ball, to be present as Donald Trump danced with his wife in front of the global cameras and a global audience, probably of billions. And who wouldn't have wanted to have been in that hall? And yet Sikhs for Justice have managed to secure at least 3 tickets. So in other words, those tickets were allocated very, very carefully. And as you rightly pointed out, James, with extreme security issues in mind, so everybody in the presence of Donald Trump in that hall will have been vetted 10 times over, which again, as you said, makes a complete mockery of India's claim and the India's legal system that claims that Sikhs for Justice and Gurpratap Singh Pannoon are terrorists. Well, terrorists attending Trump's inauguration ball? Obviously not. So it does make a complete mockery of that. But what it does do, and this is really why I think it's huge news, this has sent a message. Trump has always been about the optics, the visuals. Everything he does is a very deliberate step. Every move is always very carefully orchestrated and is designed to send a message to various parts of an audience. And by inviting Sikhs for Justice in their relatively large numbers, as it turns out, is sending a very clear message. It is saying, amongst all the other guests, that we also have a place at our table for the Sikh community, but more importantly, the pro-Khalistan community, because of course it's very obvious what Sikhs for Justice exist for. It's for Khalistan. So this is sending out a very public message, and I think specifically designed and aimed like a sniper's rifle at the Indian government. We welcome the Khalistan movement because we are a broad church here in the United States. We are a democracy. We welcome freedom of speech, and if these people are battling politically and peacefully and democratically for secession, then they are welcome at our table. And that is the power of this message. Again, it's not just attending a ball. It's their tickets have been very, very carefully allocated to people within the US population who represent certain things. And everybody in that hall represents something. And clearly something that President Trump, or his administration at least, endorses. Now, Trump himself might not be fully aware that Sikhs for Justice were there, but certainly his administration were. And it's his administration, overseen by Donald Trump, that are going to dictate the policy over the coming 4 years. So this is massive, James, and it's also, and I think it also sends out a very important message, because I'm trawling through social media over the last couple of days. The left wing are frothing at the mouth. They just cannot believe that, as they call, a fascist has taken control. A racist fascist is now in control of America, is now the most powerful man in the world. They just can't believe this. I have to say, I chuckle away, and I can't help but actually dive in and start prodding the hornet's nest with provocative comments, because they just cannot understand it. They hate it, that this, what they call, is a racist fascist. Well, as I keep pointing out, I've got news for these people. Donald Trump actually secured something like 45% or thereabouts of the Hispanic vote. He secured over 25%. That's over 1 in 4 black people voted for Donald Trump. And likewise, the Sikh community, very powerfully represented at his inaugural ball. This is not the actions of a fascist or a racist. These are the actions of a man who very publicly said yesterday, during the signing of all his things and his various speeches, he said, look, we're getting rid of this divisive agenda, this DEI agenda, what effectively is a racist agenda, because it's creating division. And these are elements that Narendra Modi himself has actually followed, ironically. This divisive agenda. Trump is throwing this away, and he's saying, no, we're going back to good old-fashioned standards where everybody is welcome from all backgrounds, all religions, all creeds. That is why he secured such a powerful vote and was such a popular vote, is because the issues he actually campaigned upon, ironically, anti-immigration, it's sensible immigration. He doesn't want criminals. He doesn't want the Indian criminals, the organised crime gangs pouring in to the United States from India and murdering US citizens like Gurpratwant Singh Pudin, etc. That's the message he's sending out. He's saying we want to control. He actually said we want immigrants. We invite people to come and become citizens of the United States from whatever backgrounds, but as long as you do it legally. And of course, legally, that means we don't want criminals. We don't want the world's criminals. We don't want the world's organised crime syndicates or the Bishnois of the world in the United States. That's the message sent out. So, yeah, James, there's so much to talk about. Unfortunately, we don't have time to really pursue every element of this story because it's so massive. But I think the key thread, the key message of this story is Sikhs for Justice were present because it sends a very powerful message to India that firstly, they are not terrorists. Secondly, we respect democracy here in the Western democratic world. And thirdly, the Khalistan message is clearly a message that has popular support and interestingly may well have the ear of Donald Trump himself, as evidenced by his own inaugural ball, James.
Absolutely, Angus, and we all know, my thoughts on Trump, but this story is all about the amazing opportunity and how it looks for the Sikh community and the potential continuation and respect for the Khalistan movement. So with that, I'll just finish reading the last paragraph of the article I wrote, and that was also one point, Angus, is that the Sikhs for Justice apparently were actually invited by President Trump. So that is my understanding from the information I have. I haven't been able to confirm that, but that's just amazing in itself. Congratulations to Sikhs for Justice and the whole team there for the victory in being at the inauguration of the 47th President of the United States, while Prime Minister Modi sat at home and upset because his great friend did not have a glass slipper waiting for him at the ball. It'll be a beacon of hope for the younger generation and other minorities the world over. And then I ended the article with Khalistan Zindabad.
Indeed.
So there we go. With that said, though, it's funny that we're talking about Modi because it seems that he is busy worrying about other things, including the potential tariffs that are coming down on various countries. And of course, one of the things that you touched on, Angus, was the fact that there are so many illegal Indians that are currently in the U.S. And this is leading me into my next story because it also seems to have rattled Modi to a point that I have not seen any other world leader actually stepping up and voluntarily saying that they are going to repatriate their illegal citizens or their citizens that are illegally in the U.S. And here Modi has come out and said that he is going to repatriate 18,000 of the Indian nationals that are living illegally in the U.S. And this story that I'm pulling up for you to view as I go through it is from The Guardian. I believe they're out in your neck of the woods, Angus, and they've reported on this fact. Now, India has identified 18,000 immigrants living in the U.S. illegally that it intends to repatriate in a bid to ease pressures under Donald Trump, according to reports. Sources who spoke to Bloomberg said the Indian government was collaborating with the U.S. authorities to identify undocumented Indian immigrants for deportation in order to demonstrate a willingness to work closely with the new Trump administration and protect legal immigration visas for Indian citizens. And that is another issue that he's worried about, is that the people who could be making larger incomes through the different visa programs and sending that money back to their families in India, of course, could have a direct impact by any, immigration closures and visa restrictions that get put on India. So that could have a big effect on the economy and the people there as well. So many of Trump's first executive actions in office have targeted illegal immigration into the U.S., including declaring a national border emergency and mobilizing troops along the U.S.-Mexico border. So this is just an amazing step by Modi to take a proactive approach to deal with it. And according to the Pew Research Center, there is an estimated 725,000 undocumented Indian immigrants in the U.S., making them the third largest group after Mexico and El Salvador. So this is just a huge announcement by Narendra Modi. It's a huge move in terms of the international community taking these threats of closing down visas, of restricting them, of sanctions and tariffs. I mean, it is obvious to the world that he is not kidding around, that he is dead serious about this, and that he is definitely going to continue with his America First policies. And that includes the crackdown that is anticipated in cities all across the U.S. in the coming weeks to start rounding up a lot of illegal citizens and shipping them out of the U.S.
Yes, James, I think this is a fascinating story, and well done to The Guardian. I have to say, The Guardian, a left-leaning newspaper, and I wouldn't say not very widely read anymore, but it is a left-leaning newspaper. The one thing The Guardian is very, very good about, and I quite often report from The Guardian, is they really do take a strong interest in Sikh issues, and their investigative reporters are extremely good. They often come out with really interesting insights and well-researched insights into the Sikh community. They've often reported about issues here in the Midlands that we've talked about. But this particular story I find very interesting. And again, as following on from Donald Trump and what we'd said about Donald Trump, I think this is very evidential of one thing that I've often said about Donald Trump is he gets results. I mean, he may be this brash orange figure that is almost a figure of fun. But the reality is, with all his rhetoric, all his bombast, all his quite often offensive demeanour, it gets things done. And this in itself, the fact that the Indian Prime Minister has had actually to announce that his government are going to repatriate 18,000 illegal Indians from America is a result. That is an enormous achievement from just one simple statement from Donald Trump. I'm going to impose massive tariffs on you, India. And what have India done? They've scurried around and come out with the most, well, actually, I have to say, diplomatically, outrageously, almost unprecedented announcement from an international leader. We're going to repatriate loads of our illegals from somebody else's country. I can't think whenever that's ever happened before. So this is what Donald Trump does. And it also, that's one side of it. As I say, it's very evidential of the impact that somebody like Donald Trump has. A non-politician, a businessman who is used to getting results, getting things done. That's his big selling point, his USP, is I get things done. Lo and behold, he's getting things done. He's actually getting India to do his dirty work for him just through a simple mechanism of a threat of tariffs, etc., etc. So that's evidence of one thing. Now, what it also implies, and I think this is more relevant really to what we talk about on a regular basis, is it's very evidential of the dynamics between India and the US. We've often speculated, James, what are the dynamics between these two countries? How does Donald Trump feel about India? Likewise, how does India feeling about Donald Trump? And I read there was an editorial in one of the main Indian newspapers. I read, I think it was the Indian Express, I read yesterday or the day before. And they took a very considered opinion, but they realised that actually Donald Trump has swept in with this enormous positive energy to get things done. done. And I think even the Indian Godi media realise, okay, I think we're going to have to toe the line a bit here if we are going to not just maintain a relationship with the United States and therefore the Western world, but we're actually going to have to probably think very carefully about what we do going forward. And I think this is a very, very important statement, public statement from India, because it is evidential and proves, as actually I speculated yesterday or 2 days ago, that India actually is the weaker party in these dynamics. I think Donald Trump, as he comes to the negotiating table with India, we've often talked about the trade deficit between India and the United States. There's a total trade of $180 odd billion, but there's a huge trade deficit that actually that the US is not benefiting from. The US has everything to gain, India has everything to lose. And on speculating that, it was apparent to me that India was the weaker party in that negotiation. This proves, I think, James, that point. It proves that India realises it is in the weaker position with the United States when it comes to negotiating table. And so it's taken a preemptive step by saying, OK, this is obviously very important to Donald Trump. Let's toe the line. Let's actually take a positive, proactive step to align with Donald Trump's vision. And let's recall or at least some of these. OK, it's a small percentage of the 750,000, but at least it's a very visible step. It's India sending a message to the United States saying, look, yes, we align with you. We want to support you. We want to be your friend. And that in itself, I think, is really important, because now Donald Trump's going to be rubbing his hands with glee and saying, well, and he's going to be telling all his critics, I told you so. Look, this is how you get things done. And it means when he now sits down with the Indian government, he's going to say, right, clearly you want to work with me. Here's how it's going to work. Now, as I said 2 days ago, I think his focus is obviously going to be on business deals, on the dollar. That's obviously the priority. But the human rights elements, I think, are still going to enter this equation. I think there is still going to be an argument. I think the human rights argument is going to be used as leverage when they come to those finer points of negotiation. I think Donald Trump says, well, what about your human rights record? It's not good. You're still detaining people illegally or under questionable legal circumstances. The world doesn't like this. So this is what I want. And if you don't comply with it, well, we'll just make it a little bit more difficult for you to operate on the global stage, because we will illuminate your human rights records. You'll find it harder to make alliances. You'll find it harder to raise cash on the international financial markets, etc., etc. So I think, James, a very, very interesting angle to this story. I think it's what it says. It's the messages that it sends out. And I think those messages are absolutely fascinating.
Absolutely, Angus, and I couldn't help but bring up, this candid shot from a hidden camera in Modi's home, where he was partying and having his own ball with the RSS members. So there you go, exclusive just from us.
I won't say the wonders of AI. Maybe it really was a hidden camera. Who knows? But we're going to be careful about our legal position.
Okay, maybe it was more AI, but it was just as fun.
Indeed, great stuff. All right, James. Well, on that note, let's move on then to my first story, and this is. Actually, talking about Narendra Modi's government and being in an uncomfortable position about human rights. Well, quietly behind the scenes, the Sikh Federation, an international, I'll call it the Sikh Federation International. This is an organisation that has recently sprung up as a coalition, an alliance of the international representatives of the Sikh community. Started with the Sikh Federation UK, and we announced several months ago that they were forming this international cooperation, which is essentially going to be a united front for the Sikh community's voice, and particularly the Sikh community who are pro-Khalistan. And winning back their secessionist and basic human rights in the Punjab. The Sikh Federation International has one of its reasons, its raisons d'être, as they call it, its reasons for existence, is to form a body that has credibility on a legal basis that can then approach the United Nations and international bodies to then push the Khalistan movement forward on a legal basis and a democratic basis. And behind the scenes, they have not been quiet. They haven't been idle. They've actually been very, very active. And at the end of last year, in November, they lobbied very powerfully the United Nations. And they sent a formal complaint, and they filed actually a formal complaint with the United Nations on behalf of the family of Shahid Bhai Hadi Singh Najjar. And as a result, several what they call special rapporteurs were appointed by the UN, particularly their Human Rights Council, the UNHRC. And they actually wrote a 16-page document to the Indian government. And they sent this to the Indian government back in November. And this document was basically, it was an analysis, quite a detailed analysis of India's various violations of international law and human rights covenants. And particularly with reference to the attack on Baihardeep Singh and other exiled Sikh activists, as well, of course, as the systematic use of Indian legislation to repress any dissent or activists. Of course, we're looking at people like Amritpal Singh and many people like Amritpal across the Punjab advocating for Khalistan. Now, the special rapporteur sent the communication to the government of India in November, as I said, outlining India's alleged actions that violate numerous international laws, and they set out the actual specific laws. So again, very precise, very detailed, very professional. This is actually setting out a very strong, powerful, researched, detailed legal case with the United Nations, that arbitrator of global affairs, setting out what India has done wrong, how it has breached international law. So this isn't just simple activism. This is a legal attack on India backed up by fully researched, fully detailed evidence, which is very powerful. So the rapporteurs provided India 60 days to provide any additional information or respond, called upon India to ensure an independent, transparent investigation to hold the responsible officials to account. And rather than cooperate with the impartial mechanism created collectively by all member states of the UNHRC, India, unsurprisingly, aggressively responded by accusing the independent mandate holders of demonstrating what they called preconceived hostility towards India. Oh, they said, they just completely dismissed it, saying, oh, it's just people who hate India just causing trouble. That's their response. And they said, justifying terrorism and supporting a separatist agenda. So that all they're just saying is it's just mischievous people who are actually terrorists and trying to secede the Punjab from India. So again, it's completely dismissed out of hand. This isn't going to stand India in good stead legally. India actually don't realise, clearly they are not used to operating at a legal level on an international basis because they don't know how the legal system works. This is lesson one. You don't come out fighting, accusing your accusers of being terrorists, etc. It just doesn't work like that. All that does is it undermines your own credibility. And it is actually the same response that India has constantly used against human rights activists, the government of Canada, of course, Justin Trudeau, James, and now the UNHRC itself. It's a spectacular legal own goal. Anyway, there you go, and I'll just quickly, and it's a two-page press release that the Sikh Federation International released, and it's worth the read. It's quite detailed, and it talks about a lot more of the detail of what was actually contained in that. But I will actually, just to summarise the story, I'll just quickly read that. They did a summary of this, they summarised it. And they said, while assessing how Baihardeep Singh and Sikh organisations like Sikhs for Justice were specifically designated as terrorists by the government of India, the communication identifies the systematic features of the legislation which allows the Indian state to target political dissidents with an excessively broad and ambiguous definition of terrorism that encompasses political activity and expression. Similarly, the evidentiary threshold to designate an individual or organisation as terrorist only requires the government to believe this is the case. It's not required to demonstrate any credible evidence, as was done in the case of Baihardeep Singh, and of course Amritpal Singh, and of course Jagtal Singh Johar, and many others. And in other words, the United Nations have investigated this, and they've actually gone to India and said, look, your legal instruments that you're using to lock up what effectively are political dissenters is actually in breach of international law. You are breaching the basic fundamental understanding of what the rule of law is. This doesn't belong under the international law. It doesn't belong under any understanding of the rule of law, and it certainly does not belong in any democratic nation. That is what the United Nations have written to India about, and they've gone into great details. Obviously, these are stories and issues that we talk about on a regular basis. How the Indian government is abusing legislation and what they call the rule of law to lock up and silence It's political dissenters. They are political prisoners. They're not criminals. They're not even terrorists. They are political dissenters. They are people that the government just simply don't like. And they, under this ridiculous legislation, this really, I'll simply say dodgy legislation that doesn't require a normal level of evidence, they can just lock them up forever. And that's what they've done with Jagtar Singh Johal. That is what they're doing with Amritpal Singh. So this is what the United Nations are now on to. And India responds by saying, you're all terrorists. Anybody who says they're all terrorists. Again, it's going to be a huge own goal for India, this. So as a result of India's actions and legalised violence through the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act, the UAPA, the government has been able to criminalise political advocacy for Sikh self-determination while using its intelligence agencies and diplomatic officials to orchestrate violence against exiled Sikh activists around the world. The reporters, so it's the reporters from the UN themselves who's saying this, it's not Sikhs for Justice, it's the United Nations' own investigators have discovered this. They concluded that these attacks are leading to an increasingly hostile situation in Punjab, as of course, again, we've been reporting on. India's ongoing actions are a clear challenge to the fragile stability in South Asia. This is why the United Nations are now pricking up their ears in interest, because India's persecution of human rights in the Sikh community in the Punjab isn't just a local affair. This is actually creating an instability in the whole region. It's actually making South Asia, Southern Asia, that whole subcontinent area, it's actually making it unstable. This is going to have an impact on neighbouring nations, on the whole geopolitics of the area, because as we've often talked about, the persecution of the Khalistan movement, the persecution of the Sikhs within the Punjab is leading to the breakup of India. The United Nations are paying attention to this and taking this very seriously, is because they're saying, look, you do realise, they're not saying this outright, but the implication is, you do realise, Mr. Modi, that with your RSS agenda, your persecution of the Sikh community, your dismissal of a normal democratic process of secessionism, of the right to self-determination, is potentially leading to the breakup of India and all the potential instability that that will bring to this region. That's why the United Nations are concerned. This is why Narendra Modi needs to take this a little bit more seriously. And they said the most basic principles of diplomacy and international relations are basically being ignored here. The continued targeting of Sikhs in this way has the explosive potential of accelerating conflict and instability with dangerous ramifications for the broader region. They're setting it out in black and white, James. In these circumstances, regional and global stakeholders must contribute to ensuring a comprehensive resolution of the underlying tensions. As Sikhs are a directly affected party to this dispute, India's violent crimes cannot be addressed solely between the US, Canada and India. It's imperative that Sikh representatives are party to any diplomatic discussions around the current issues, etc., etc. So there's an awful lot of information there that unfortunately we don't have time to cover. But James, this is actually very, very significant. Narendra Modi is actually painting himself into a corner here. The United Nations are taking this Khalistan movement very, very seriously. Sikh Federation International has just fired its first major warning shot. That broadside has just been fired across Narendra Modi's bows. The United Nations are also very clearly on the side of the Khalistan movement now. Narendra Modi is losing friends and is losing them fast, James.
Absolutely, and they can charge back at the UN and the investigators with all the accusations and claims they want. But at the end of the day, you know that this has got to be rattling the BJP of Modi, and the opposition, because they don't want to be viewed in that light, considering that their goal is to be viewed as a developed nation. And this definitely puts them in their place and puts them on notice that there are some major stumbling blocks in the international community and concerns that need to be addressed long before they can get that recognition and a seat at the big boys' table.
Absolutely, and a sensible, mature, responsible government of a large nation, in fact the most populous nation on earth, should take this a little bit more seriously, rather than just brandishing accusations that their accusers are just all a bunch of terrorists and actually adopting, as I often say, a teenage tantrum about it. They should have taken this seriously. They should actually respond to these accusations with evidence to the contrary, and they're not doing that. They're just saying, look, no, we're not taking this seriously. You're all a bunch of terrorists. Basically, we'll just carry on as we're doing, and what are you going to do about it? That is India's attitude towards this, which is fantastic, I have to say, for the whole Sikh community and the Khalistan community, because it means that the grown-ups in the room around the world, who are essentially the major stakeholders of the United Nations, in particular, look at the G7 nations are going to start saying, hang on a second, these accusations that the United Nations are now investigating themselves independently, because of course the UN is independent, they're going to start realising that India is a bit of a joker. They can't take India seriously, they can't take the Indian government seriously, and any evidence that subsequently the Indian government tried to produce, it's already lost the argument, it's already lost credibility. So this, I think, is a really powerful body blow sent by the Sikh Federation International. They're playing this game very cleverly. They know what they're doing. They know how to tackle this now. Back in the 80s and 90s, it was a local militia. It was a local uprising against an aggressive militant state. This has morphed into something a bit more serious, a bit more grown up now. This is a very strong, powerful, democratic, peaceful movement that is playing the game. It's playing the game properly. It's playing it legally. It's playing it democratically. This is why it will win. This is why Khalistan will happen, because India is acting like a child in a tantrum. It doesn't know how to play the game. It doesn't understand the rules. It's the grown-ups in the room now that are playing it by the rules. This is why they're going to win. So, on that note, James, let's move back into local affairs within the Punjab. And of course, we've been talking about the persecution of human rights. A lot of this goes back to 1947, of course, the partition that occurred after independence. Now, on January the 26th is India Republic Day. India Republic Day is the anniversary of when the Constitution of India was formally adopted in 1950. So it is the anniversary, January 26th, of what is now called Republic Day, when India actually became a republic with backed up by a constitution. But a constitution that was not signed, endorsed, supported, validated or whatever by the Sikh community. It was steamrolled through by the Brahmin the Brahmin caste of India, who were effectively handed control by the British. It was the British ruling elite, the British Empire, who handed India over to the Brahmin ruling elite of India, who then wrote a constitution, and do watch my podcast about the constitution to understand the evidence and see the evidence to support this. That constitution was drafted and was steamrolled through with the simple agenda that it is written by the Brahmins for the Brahmins to ensure that they can maintain control of India forevermore. And that is essentially what's happened. So this is why the Sikh community, who understood pretty rapidly after 1947 and then subsequently after 1950 what had happened, the huge betrayal that they had suffered under all the promises that they'd been given by the Brahmins, by Nehru, by Gandhi, all these people who utterly betrayed them as a community. They realised that India, the modern India as it is now, there's nothing to do with them. It doesn't represent them. It certainly doesn't recognise them as a community, and it certainly doesn't support their existence, and quite the opposite. So as a result, the Constitution has always been seen as a tainted document that does not represent the Sikh community, and certainly does not represent the people of Punjab. So as a result, across Punjab on January the 26th, a pro-freedom Sikh political group, the Dal Khalsa, and the Shiromani Akali Dal Amritsar have joined hands to stage a massive protest march on the eve of Republic Day in the region of Majha, Doaba and Malwa in the Punjab. And at a press conference, Dal Khalsa working president Paramjit Singh Mand said that the protest list is about the fake encounters that we often talk about, the extrajudicial and extraterritorial targeted killings which are still going on, wrongful detentions that we often talk about, whether it's Amritpal Singh, whether it's Jagtal Singh Johal, or the many, many others who still reside in jail after completing their 30-year sentences, etc. And the imposition of laws that we often talk about, the Unlawful Activity Prevention Act, the National Security Act, this ridiculous piece of legislation which is a carte blanche gift to the government to basically lock up anyone that they don't like, to lock up political prisoners forever, and of course to stifle dissidents. Governments, anti-farmers, pro-corporate policies, and denial of right to self-determination for ethnic minorities who aspire for statehood. Of course, we're talking about Khalistan. He said activists from their organisations will march on the streets of Gurdaspur, Jalandhar, Mansar on January the 25th. So the leaders of both the organisations extended their best wishes. This is interesting. They extended their best wishes to President Donald Trump, stating that, quote, the Sikh nation looks forward for support and succour to tackle challenges being faced by Sikhs globally. So again, a hand of friendship reached out from the Sikh community within the Punjab to Donald Trump. Again, another signal that there are these ties between the Trump administration and the Sikh community. It's very promising to see that. Now, Dal Khalsa leader Kanwarpal Singh dismissed a high-powered inquiry committee set up by the government of India to probe this foiled murder plot of Gurpratwant Singh Pannoon. He called it a whitewash aimed at hoodwinking international powers in the aggrieved Sikh community. And as he said, it's a clear and classic case of exonerating the country's political leadership and external spy agency top brass that engineered extrajudicial and extraterritorial targeted killings of Khalistani activists. And he said it's preposterous to believe that an individual, as in Vikram Yadav, CC1 that we talk about, who was then attached with Indian Intelligence Agency Research and Analysis Wing, RAW, have plotted the conspiracy on his own without taking then agency boss Samant Goel in a loop. In other words, he's saying there's no way that Vikram Yadav, who had nothing against Gurpratwant Singh Pannoon personally, why on earth would somebody like Vikram Yadav organise this assassination plot? Of course it's come from higher up. It's nonsense. Can so-called high-powered inquiry committee explain to the Sikh diaspora what enmity Vikas has with Pannoon? In other words, explain why he would have done such a thing. The Sikh groups also called upon the masses to stay away from all Republic Day celebrations, basically boycott anything to do with the Republic Day. While India would celebrate its 75th Republic year on January the 26th, he said, we have no hesitation to place on record that the Constitution has failed the Punjab and the Sikh people. The establishment has used best democratic ideals and institutions, including the Constitution itself, to scuttle our religious, social and political aspirations. Likewise, the Shiromani Akali Dal Amritsar leader Harpal Singh Baila said, at one point, India's first Prime Minister, Nehru, conveniently accepted the right to self-determination, including the right to secede. So even Nehru himself, in the early days, said, yeah, we respect this right to secede. But later on, Indian leadership backtracked from those words. The present Sikh struggle for independence from India was rooted in that betrayal of promises by the Indian leaders back in 1947. And he said it's regrettable that the present constitution denies nationalities having a distinct identity, history and culture and their right to self-determination as recognised under the United Nations. Again, very important, and this is why the Sikh Federation International and all the organisations behind it are pursuing the United Nations route, because they know self-determination is a recognised right under international law, under law designated by the United Nations, of which India is actually a part and a signatory. And he added, while a majority of Sikhs continue to participate in the political life of India, the religio-political future of the people of Punjab is at risk. And he said the leaders will therefore contest and resist the hypocrisy of the Indian state, which is continuing its tirade and onslaught against Sikhs settled worldwide. So there you go, James. I think it's very clear. The Sikh community in the Punjab, their feelings are very clear. When our critics come in saying, oh, no, this Khalistan movement, who is it? I don't know anybody in Punjab who's up for it. Well, it's very clear, and the evidence on a daily basis is there. There is a massive support for Khalistan. There is a massive anti-Indian government movement in the Punjab. They're only just now starting to find their voices out after years of fear and oppression. The 1980s and 1990s silenced the Khalistan movement through sheer brute force and murder, cold-blooded murder. People were too afraid after that, after the might of the Indian state sending in troops and the police, armed police and troops, to murder in cold blood anybody who dared stand up for Khalistan. So understandably, it went quiet. But now, through democratic means, through peaceful means, the movement is finding a new voice. They've realised, hang on, we couldn't win it militarily. There's no way we can beat the might of the Indian state. But what we can do is do it through democratic means, through the rule of law. Because that always wins in the end, James. The rule of law, democracy, always, without exception, wins in the end. That is why the Khalistan movement will win this argument.
Absolutely, Angus, and I guess you could say that Modi, the RSS, and the RA, and the others involved figuratively shot themselves in the foot when they took out the hit on Mr. Poonen, and when they went after and successfully took out Mr. Najur. And this really has driven the demand and the interest and the media coverage to India's doorstep, saying, look, you cannot be behaving like this. And the side effect or the byproduct of that has been the awareness about the Khalistan issue, about the Khalistan movement, and about the need and the determination to have that homeland for the Sikh community. That, again, like I said earlier, is not just for them, but they will create it to welcome all. And Angus, I'm looking forward to our lunch there.
Absolutely, indeed, as am I, and I very much look forward to that. And I think you're right, James. I think these actions by the Indian government, it demonstrates the inexperience and I think almost the immaturity of the Indian government. Their actions, whether it was murdering Najjar and everything that they've done and said since, are really the actions that are gifting Khalistan to the Khalistan movement. Everything the Indian government is doing and has done is actually pushed and increased and grown support for the Khalistan movement. And it's incredible that they don't even realise this. And as I often say, it's wonderful actually, everything that the Indian government have done, notwithstanding the murders and stuff. But actually, if you look at the bigger picture, everything they have done has actually increased support for the Khalistan movement. It's increased the legal argument for Khalistan. It's gifting evidence to the Khalistan movement. So all I would say is thank you, Narendra Modi and the BJP. You're actually making it happen yourselves through your own actions. So anyway, Jez, let's move on now, in the interest of time, into our comments section. Loads of comments as always. Thank you to our wonderful audience for all your contributions. As always, loads of really interesting comments. I'll quickly zip through these. There's one comment I particularly want to focus on today. Achal Singh Gill. We talked about the mother of hypocrisy, and I assume you're hopefully not talking about James and myself, as we often get called as Western hypocrites, which of course we very belligerently push back on every time. But no, I think Achal Singh Gill is one of our regular commenters. I think that you're obviously talking about India's hypocrisy here, and yes, you're absolutely right. I think India is deeply hypocritical. But we talked a lot about, as we have done in fact today, about the trade argument and the dynamics between the United States and India. And Jura Rai actually follows on by saying, look, the trade between countries is necessity of human beings across the globe. Look, we need international trade, it's important, but politicians must stop using it for their criminal politics. And then Jura Rai continues to say, like India, using people's money contributed by the world is being used against the slaughtered minorities people. So what actually you're saying here, as I understand it, is actually all this investment, all this money pouring into Indians and propping up the Indian government is actually being used by the Indian government, instead of building its own economy, is actually being used, in fact, to build its resources to persecute its minorities, whether that's the Muslims, whether it's the Christians, or indeed the Sikhs in the Punjab, or J and K, etc. So yeah, and unfortunately, again, this is a failure of governance. This is why the Indian government actually are missing a huge trick here. They have so much potential as a nation, but instead this obsessive agenda I think you're talking about here, this obsessive agenda to persecute its minorities for the benefit of Hindu imperialism is actually holding India back, James. I think India could be so much more. It has such a massive potential, but its governance with its obsessive Brahmanical agenda to destroy the Sikh community particularly is holding India back.
Yeah, absolutely. And not just the Sikh community, but the Christians, the Dalits, the Muslims. I mean, just so many. But, in terms of the visualization in the media and around the world, the Sikhs seem to be the poster child of the atrocities and the human rights abuses that India is perpetrating.
Indeed. And now I'm going to this next comment in our critics corner. This is a very long comment, and I don't want to get dragged too much into this comment. But in the purposes of balance, I wanted to show out this comment, and it was actually Raoul Shine who made this comment. Thank you for this long and very considered comment. And it's a very interesting comment. And it was YouTube. When you won't have seen it, hopefully until today, your comment was filtered out not by us, but by YouTube. And again, to our critics, we don't ever filter out your comments. We always show any comment, that even critical comments, we always show them up. We will not filter them out because we are completely open to being criticised. We stand for free speech. That is what we stand for. It's YouTube that quite often filters them out. And I always, always, always approve them. I have approved this comment, so hopefully it has now appeared within beneath the video it was shown. But let me go through this comment. As I say, the only ones I have ever stopped approving are ones that are just full of bad language and just insults. Obviously, there's no point approving them because they actually make no point. Anyway, right, this comment, and I'm going to be very careful what we talk about here on this, James, because we're now entering an area that we don't know about, and I think not being Sikhs, we are not familiar with the nuances of the Sikh community. And again, I'm looking at our audience for your input on this. I want our audience to respond to this. Please let me know your thoughts on this comment. Let me quickly go through it. And essentially, this is after my podcast last week with Dr. Singh Grewal. We talked about the religious apartheid that's happening in India. Essentially, this Hindu imperialism, again, I've talked about it quite a lot, but this Hindu imperialism has created a religious apartheid where communities, the minorities, are being persecuted, not least the Sikh community. Now, what Raoul excuse the pun, shines the light on is actually, he claims, or I assume it's a he, claims that, Grewal himself is a fascist because actually there is a fascist caste system within the Sikh community itself. And what Raoul says, or claims in his comment, is that the caste Sikhs is split up between the Jats, and we often talk about, well, we don't, this has been mentioned a lot, the Jats are, I think, what he calls the ruling elite within a Sikh caste system, and it operates a caste system, essentially a fascist system within the Sikh community itself. They undertake terrorism, Khalistan, so killed PM-elect of India, Indira Gandhi. They even led massive ethnic cleansing of Hindus, Dalits, Sikhs, etc. The entire Punjab was in a state of terrorism. It's on record. Okay, so what you're saying is it's not the Indian state that were behind this, the RSS, the Hindutva movement, and indeed the Brahmins. You're saying it was actually what you call the ruling caste, the Jats of the Sikh community, that were behind the murders, the extrajudicial killings, etc. And you also then go on to say it's the Western politicians who are nurturing Khalistani terrorism. You're saying it's in the West's interest to nurture what you call Khalistani terrorism, which has emboldened them further, and thus have turned against Punjab and turning Punjab, as you say, into basically a drug-addled region. And you say in Canada, these caste Sikhs are into terrorism, mob or mafia-style abusing of others, and etc., etc., and into abusing any society they go, playing the victim card. And so you're preying on casteism of Hindu, while caste Sikhs, such as Dr. Grewal himself and Jat Sikhs themselves, are castes, thus a Dalit leader, and you refer to Dr. Ambedkar, and please watch my podcast to understand the history of how Dr. Ambedkar fitted into the 1947 partition, the discussions about the constitution. Dr. Ambedkar was a key figure in those negotiations. He represented, to some degree, the Sikh community, but particularly represented the Dalits, the lower caste, the lowest caste, and in those discussions. And there was a point where he was considering converting to Sikhi. He didn't. Instead, he actually became, I think, a Buddhist. Yeah, he chose Buddhism instead. Now, if you watch the podcast, actually, the Sikh community themselves, members of the Sikh community, actually said that Ambedkar did not convert to Sikhi because if he did, those hundreds of millions of lower caste Dalits would themselves then have converted to Sikhi. Had that happened, the Sikh community would now number in the hundreds of millions. It would actually probably be one of the largest communities in India. That in itself would be an existential threat to the ruling class of Brahmins. So therefore, Dr. Ambedkar was actually strong-armed into saying you will not convert to Sikhi, you will convert to something else that does not threaten the Brahmanical control of India. In other words, that's why he became a Buddhist. But what you are saying, Raoul Shine, is in fact he rejected Sikhism because of your argument, because he actually recognised it as a fascistic religion. That's why he chose Buddhism instead, etc., etc. So again, you continue along that vein, and then you finish off by saying, of even in West, these Sikhs follow casteism and extreme fascism while playing the victim card. Lower caste Sikhs started speaking against them and wanted to bring a law for the same, which these Sikhs blocked. So in reality, they themselves are castists and stand with caste Hindus when laws are brought in against casteism of Sikhs and caste Hindus. Shame on such journalism. Well, all I would say is if we're wrong, I apologise. We are mere journalists trying to bring you the truth. The truth, as I have seen it so far, and all the evidence that I have uncovered independently, point to the fact that actually any fascistic elements are actually from the caste system that is embedded into the Hindu religion and has been perpetuated by the Indian government, despite actually, as you say, their legal efforts to stamp it out. In fact, it's alive and well, as we've often reported, and it's alive and well even in the diaspora. But you're saying actually it's not. You're saying actually this caste system exists within the Sikh community. And this is now why I'm turning to our audience. Please let me know your thoughts on this. Do you think the Sikh community is essentially ruled by a caste system? Now, every community has a hierarchy. Here in the UK, we have a class system. It doesn't dictate life. It doesn't dictate society. It doesn't create issues that we often report about. For example, a higher caste Hindu urinating on a Dalit, a video that I've often showed up to demonstrate the evils of this system, purely because he was just a lower caste system. That doesn't happen in the Western world through our own social hierarchies. We all naturally, we're human beings, we have hierarchies. What you're saying is that the Sikh community, which I believe has just a normal human hierarchy, you're saying it goes beyond that. You're saying it is actually a caste system. And it's the ruling Jats that are actually oppressing the underclass in the Sikh community. I'll leave that up to you, our audience. What are your thoughts on this? Is this true? Is this guy right? Or this lady, I don't know, this person, this Ryle Shine. Is this person right? Please let me know. James, I guess you and I are very much in the dark on this.
Very much so, Angus. And I mean, we weren't there for one. And number two, we don't understand a lot of the nuances and the complexities that the issue holds. But again, as you clearly stated, that the research and information that we have access to and that we have found definitely contradicts what this comment is alluding to. So again, every society, as you said, has a certain hierarchy, a certain class system, but it's also a matter of fair representation where you can still have a certain caste system. Look at the inauguration of Donald Trump as a clear example. There was over $1.2 trillion worth of billionaires in the room at the inauguration. But that does not mean that Donald Trump is not going to represent the farmers in Idaho or the victims of the California fires, the victims of hurricanes and massive floods. He is there for a fair representation of the people of the United States, whereas this caste system clearly did not represent fairly all of the people in which it should have. And I think that's the big differentiation that needs to be understood and remembered, Angus.
Absolutely. And I think this comment is a very powerful and a very important comment. We are not afraid of counter-narrative. All we care about is actually understanding the truth and reporting that truth. That is why we exist. If there is a counter-narrative that is supported by evidence, we are more than happy. And you say shame on such journalism. Well, as I've said, we want the truth. Provide evidence. If you can support what you're saying, we will naturally report it. We are pro-Khalistan because we believe in the whole concept of Khalistan. We believe in democracy, the rule of law, etc. But, as I say, we don't understand the nuances of the Sikh community. That is up to our audience to come back with evidence to reject this comment or even to support it. I don't know. But that is why we are merely the messengers. We are merely the conduit to try our best efforts to provide the truth. So I would say to you, Ryle Shine, thank you very much indeed for your comment. It was obviously a very passionate comment and a very deep comment, a very well researched comment. Thank you for that. And as I say, I'm going to leave that up to our audience, James, to respond to that one with their opinion, who actually are more qualified to respond to that one.
Absolutely, Angus. And I mean, anybody that comes to me and says that their way or their system, their country, their religion is perfect, you show me that person and I'll show you a liar, because every system, every religion, there are faults, and that's human nature, and it's not necessarily intentional. It's just the way of the world.
Indeed. And to move on to much more happier and positive things, I deliberately, after that comment, felt a little bit down. And I thought, you know what we need is to boost the mood a little. So it was our final set of comments, just a list from actually several names I don't recognise. And I hope these are newcomers to our channel, some of them. So thank you for your comments. Lovely supportive comments, very happy comments, and the final comment from Captain Jack, who actually I think is a regular. Thanks, Angus and James, for the news. Wish God give you guys long life. Well, thank you very much for that lovely sentiment. But really, James, I think both of us, want to extend our thanks, a huge thanks for so many wonderful, positive, supportive comments that we do get. As we said, James, we don't always get it right. All we care about is reporting the truth. We just want to get the truth out. But it really helps us when we get loads of comments like this. It just gives us a nice warm feeling inside, James.
And it just shows that we've made a good choice in being here to represent our pasty white people, to try to educate ourselves, learn about the customs, the history, the culture, and to share it with others, not just the Sikh community, but to act as a conduit or a bridge between, various communities and bring the truth out. So thank you.
Indeed. So thank you once again to all of you who've made such lovely comments. And then these are just a small selection of the very, very many that have come in beneath our videos. So thank you, as always, for those. Of course, keep those comments coming. And as I say, we really do appreciate the long, well thought out, thoroughly researched comments, which are very educational. And as I said, we're not afraid of a counter narrative. If you've got a counter narrative, tell us what you think. Do you tell us why you disagree with us? And if you can back it up with sensible, well thought out sentences, we'll be more than happy to talk about it. And maybe even enter a little bit of banter whilst we're at it. But in the meantime, though, thank you so much for watching Perspectives once again. Don't forget you can message us directly at message@satlogetv.com if you'd like to talk to us directly, not put something in the public domain. But in the meantime, thanks again for watching. It is a goodbye from me. It's a goodbye from James.
Stay safe, everyone.
You have, of course, been watching Perspectives. We will see you next time.